back to the Everything College Football podcast. Today, me and Nick will be looking at college football's hottest seats, coaches that are probably going to be axed at the end of 2024 if they cannot get their tenure steered in the right direction. And the pretty obvious one here is Sam Pittman to kick off this list at Arkansas. As you know, he went 3-7 in his debut season, back-to-back years of pretty solid football. They had 2 bowl wins, went 9-4 in 2021. They were ranked at eighth in FBS at one point. Then they got steamrolled by Georgia, started a 3-game skid. They played a tough game versus Alabama. That was their 4th and final loss of the year. Beat Penn State in the bowl game. So a pretty respectable year from the Razorbacks overall, even though they certainly left a lot on the table. 2022 seemed like, potentially a good building block season. They lost 4 games, all by 3 points or less. I said they would have the worst pass defense in college football, and that ranked exactly dead last, Nick. That was a big reason why this team, was held back in 2022. This past season, this is a team that I felt would probably be able to compete with some of the bigger dogs in the SEC. I gave them praise for a nice offseason in the portal. They had a lot of experience coming back. They had some nice size on the offensive line. And they did nothing. 128th in sacks. Their run game was flat out awful. Only had 9 touchdowns on the ground. Raheem Sanders, of course, was real beat up. KJ Jefferson didn't play his best ball. Obviously, the supporting cast didn't really show up. This is a team that's significantly disappointed, Nick. They started 2-0, lost 6 in a row. All those games did come by 12 points or less, 5 of them being one-score games. So it's not the worst in the world, right? You're not getting blown out. Well, until the end of the season. They somehow upset Florida in Gainesville. Seem to have a little bit of momentum on their side. They lost their final 2 conference games by 38 and 34 points, respectively, Nick. The big issue here with Sam Pittman is there's no signature wins, and we've talked about this each of the last 2 seasons, and they've just not been able to accomplish that. That's certainly something that's been a big blemish for Sam Pittman. They have played Alabama close in a handful of games, but again, no signature wins. It's been really tough for them to try and even get to that point to where they can secure a victory. And again, they got flat out steamrolled by Georgia. This is going south incredibly quick for Sam Pittman, Nick, because last year's team it's probably going to be better than this one's, quite frankly. It's just they had a lot working for them on both sides of the balls, and they flat out disappointed. I really don't know what to say about Arkansas. I was just genuinely disappointed in this team that went 4-8, when I think I picked them to win 8 or 9 games.
They were a very poor team last year, 4-8, and I'm shocked that Sam Pittman still has a job, especially with how last year ended. They were blown out at home by an Auburn team that really struggled at times last year, and there was that whole Polar Express fiasco where the players were watching the Polar Express in the locker room at halftime while losing by a significant amount of points to Auburn. Just a bad look. Pittman, was a first time head coach when he was hired at Arkansas, other than a 2-year stint in junior college in the 90s. Came over from Georgia. He was an O-line coach, a very respected O-line coach, a guy that was able to build in the trenches. A bit of a gamble for Arkansas, a program that was really in the gutter for a very long time. Had been about 10 plus years for them where they struggled. They were not getting any SEC wins. They were just on the bottom of the barrel down there with Vandy. So when Pittman came in and, got 3 wins in his first season in a COVID-shortened season, then picked up 9 wins and 7 wins, it seemed like they had finally found the guy to stabilize the ship. And especially the NIL era, there's a lot of money out there in Arkansas. But last year was just a complete disaster, and they really have not done a lot of work at all in the portal, and recruiting has been pretty bad so far in this cycle. They seem to be in a tough spot here right now. I was shocked that he kept his job. They gave him 1 more year, but I got to think if they don't get to 6 wins this year, he's going to be axed very quickly. And the schedule is tough, right? We're going to go over the schedule. Is not easy at all in the new look SEC. So things are going to be difficult here. He lacks that signature win. They have a couple of close signature losses, if you want to call that. Alabama 2 years ago at home, they fought in that game tooth and nail until Alabama got a couple nice big runs at late stage of the game to pull away. I was at that game. Tough environment, certainly when they're playing well. They've played Alabama well and Bryant-Denny the last 2 times as well, but have not been able to pick up the win. Got blown out by Georgia. Things look tough down there in Fayetteville. I got to say, I just think they can do better at this point in time. Like I said, they got a huge NIL war chest, and they should be able to bring in a coach that can recruit a little bit better and develop talent out of the portal with that NIL money. Arkansas has no excuses, in my opinion, with how much money they have in their donor base and the great stadium, great fan support. They really just don't deserve another 4-8 season out there in Fayetteville.
11-23 conference record for Pittman over 4 years. And I think them landing John Calipari kind of alludes to what you're talking about, Nick. And I think that's certainly going to raise the bar here in football. It was already going to be tough for Pittman to keep his job, but now they've landed Calipari. I think the boosters are certainly it's going to be really tough, I think, because they're certainly aware if they can land a name like that, why can't they do it in football, wouldn't you think?
I would think it's absolutely going through people's minds. And Pittman probably was sweating when he heard that they hired the Kentucky basketball legendary head coach, because Arkansas should be able to go out and hire a great college football coach. I'm not saying they're going to go hire, the top guy out there available, but they should be able to get a really respectable name. Not someone who's an O-line coach at Georgia. They should be able to get someone with real solid head coaching experience, potentially even in the SEC with the way that they have that NIL war chest down there. I think, this year is going to be a very tough year for Arkansas. The schedule is not favorable at all. They got a lot of tough games ahead of them.
Now you look at next on the list, a guy who's really drifted up here quite fast is Dave Randa, entering his 5th season, obviously 2-7. Kind of like Matt Rule, they both had awful debut seasons, won the Big 12 crown, competed for the playoffs right after that, 12-2 in 2021. Went 6-7 in 2022. A very disappointing end there, as they were just abysmal to end out the season. 4 straight losses. They competed in those ones. They blew it against TCU, a game that would have kept the Frogs out of the playoffs. Texas, they competed with them to almost the final buzzer. Lost to Air Force in a disappointing bowl game. This is a Baylor team that I had expectations for in 2023. They ended up going 3-9. I felt they could get back on track and win the crown this past season. Felt they had some good pieces in place, like the coaching that I thought they'd be able to provide. They flat out missed the mark, and so did I in my prediction. They went 3-9, Nick. Defense got worse while the offense also moved backwards. They lost at home to Texas State in the opener. They were in 5 one-score games, went 2-3 in those contests. This incoming recruiting class is the worst ranked in his tenure. Outside of DeQuan Finn and Jaquise Evans, the portal work is quite underwhelming. The program really just seems to be moving very backwards, very fast. Randa, of course, would be a coveted defensive coordinator. There was some chatter that he may have left this offseason to be a DC somewhere, but just wait a few more months, Nick. I think that's going to be a reality, it appears, because this Baylor team's just drifted incredibly backwards, and obviously it's really hard to win out here in this program, and they've done a lot better over the past 10 to 20 years of really upgrading the facilities and the attractiveness of this Baylor school out in Waco. But right now it seems like everything's coming to a crashing end for Randa. Again, the recruiting class is the worst ranked, while you're also coming off a 3-9 season. This is just abysmal, Nick. I just can't believe I was that off, though, picking them to win the Big 12, and they couldn't even come close to a bowl game.
Another team that hired a first-time head coach, Dave Randa, was a respected defensive coordinator at stints at Hawaii, Utah State, then Wisconsin. Those Wisconsin teams, top 10 defense all 3 years. Then his first year at LSU in 2016, top 5 defense as well as top 15 defense in 2017. The defenses got a little bit weaker in 2018 and 2019. They were top 30 and top 32 in the nation, respectively. He ends up at Baylor the COVID year, 2-7, like you said, but then they competed, won the conference title in 2021. That team was so fun to watch. Then 2 disappointing seasons. That bowl loss to Air Force was a really disappointing showing in 2022. And this team, you were very high on them last year. I was a little more cautiously optimistic, but I did not expect 2-7. That was never even remotely close. Or 3-9, I beg your pardon. 2-7 in the conference was not even remotely close to what I expected of this team. They were just flat at this point. They lost Texas State, an embarrassing loss on week 1 for this team. Just a poor showing across the board. A really solid defensive coach, but the recruiting has not been there. They've not really done any portal work either. Tough place to recruit. Baylor, certainly. They have scandals in the past and not really a great history in terms of total production outside of the RG3 brief era where they're a really fun team to watch. This team has struggled right now, and now at 3-9, and Randa is really find himself flying up this hot seat. The schedule this year is tough as well. They got a trip to Utah earlier in the year. That's going to be tough. They got to play that Air Force team again at home now. They play at Colorado as well. Some tough matchups early on for this team. It's going to be a make or break year. If they start losing games early on, if they go 0-4 or 1-3, 0-4 to start the year, he can be in a whole lot of trouble very quickly.
And looking at the next candidate here, one that's certainly going to be an interesting conversation, Billy Napier. We talked about the Florida Gators back in January, and we kind of laid out our opinions more in depth. I'll link that episode in the description. I've correctly predicted the Florida Gators record each of the past 2 seasons. Obviously, the seat's going to be hot, Nick, at the end of the year. You look at the schedule, it's just going to happen, obviously bearing something, crazy. But is it warranted or not is going to be the real discussion, and I definitely think that is not going to be warranted. I think they're going to pull off at least one upset that's really going to inject some excitement into this fan base. This is a team that had last year the 12th overall ranked recruiting class. They had 5 guys in the top 150. This incoming class, they're able to land, DJ Lagaway, a big-time 5-star defensive tackle as well. So I think there's momentum certainly building in Gainesville. It's going to take time, though. This is a team that they're building up the trenches. I think they're looking to certainly, continue to beef up their defense that has nothing but underclassmen last year, Nick. They're returning pretty much everybody that was on the roster on defense. A very young team that was able to battle and compete. We thought they were going to get rolled over when they went to play Missouri late in the year, Nick. They should have beat them, quite frankly. Very impressive stuff from Billy Napier. This team still believes. They're still out there fighting. Got to be very impressed with that. And I think people are buying into this culture that he has going on right now. It's going to take time. Look at the schedule, though, again, Nick. He's going to be on the hot seat. Is it warranted or not? That's going to be the discussion. Again, I don't think it is going to, unless they just pull a Baylor and go 3-9, win 4 games, and I think you'll certainly raise that up because they shouldn't be that poor, right? But they're going to struggle to compete for a bowl game this year with Georgia, Texas, LSU. I mean, the schedule is just abysmal, right? How they look in those games is what I'm going to be looking forward to, and I think most of the people who can be reasonable when it comes to Gator fandom, that's also going to be something they look to represent as well, is how they look in these ball games. I think he's doing a pretty good job right now, Nick. The 4th and 6th ranked overall recruit. Yeah, you can go ahead. I don't want to repeat basically how good they're doing on the recruiting trail. Is it warranted or not, though?
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It is not warranted. He shouldn't be on the hot seat. We look at the schedule. This is such a tough schedule. Just off my early estimates, looking at it right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 teams ranked in the preseason top 25 are on this schedule. 9 teams. That is absolutely ridiculous when you look at it. And Florida, they are not scared to go out and schedule tough non-conference. They have that regular season battle every year with Florida State out of conference. They picked up Miami this year. Also picked up UCF, who are no joke, out of conference, with the only game that you could really call as a confirmed win out of conference against Samford at home. This is a tough schedule across the board. A&M, Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, Kentucky, Tennessee, just a gauntlet of teams. Even Mississippi State on the road, that's not a confirmed win either, in my opinion, with the new look head coach they have out there in Starkville. It's a tough draw, certainly. Billy Napier, in my opinion, gets a lot of slack. Sunbelt Billy's the nickname gets thrown around. I think it's very unfair. He was very solid at Louisiana, won the division or the conference title in every single year. All 4 years there, took them to 4 straight bowl games, made Louisiana a legit team in the Sunbelt. Florida fans, Florida boosters, they don't give their coaches enough time. I don't think Dan Mullen should have been run out of town the way he was. I thought Dan Mullen was still doing a pretty good job there. They ran him out of town. They're trying to run Napier out of town as well. They have high expectations of Florida for instant success. And in this day and age, the new SEC, instant success is not going to be achievable at a program like Florida. It's going to take a little bit of time to build. And once you kind of get that nice bare bone base of solid in the trenches, you can start to get those extra skill positions and develop your team into a contender. I think firing Billy Napier would be a complete disaster from Florida right now, because I don't think they'll be able to get somebody who would instantly be a lot better at the X's and O's. This is a guy that's coached under Nick Saban, coached at Clemson under previous head coaches there. So he's got good experience as a coach overall. X's and O's guys, good recruiter as well. I think pulling the trigger on him would just be an absolute ludicrous decision. But then again, that's what Florida does. They take these type of moves. I said it in the earlier episode in January. They roll the dice too much and they expect way too much early on. I think if you give him 2 more seasons, he can find success. This year's going to be tough, but next year could be potentially better after that. It's a tough schedule. He's got to get some slack, in my opinion. But those Florida fans, they're very, very anxious to win. They want to be back to the top of college football, and they want to find a way to get there very soon.
Yeah, I certainly agree with the Dan Mullen part. I know that things were going a little sour in his last season, but it seems like he was run out of town way too early. And if Florida checks those boxes, pulls off an upset or even contends for that, and they play, they show some good football in the games against those tough opponents, I think that it would be ridiculous to put him on the hot seat, even though obviously silly things keep happening, like 12 players on special teams and whatnot. That obviously has to stop. But I don't think Napier should be on the hot seat one bit. And if they run him out of town, I'd consider this just a cloud organization. Look at that Pat Narduzzi, one that's done a great job at Pittsburgh. Ex-Michigan State defensive coordinator, won the ACC title in 2021. 7 of his 9 seasons have been winning ones, but just recently, they significantly regressed in a pretty bad way. I picked this team to win. It was either 9 or 10 games, and instead they went 3-9. Nick, a couple teams on here that just made me absolutely look awful. One being an upset win over Louisville, and they also had an easy win in the opener against the FCS Wofford. The defense played much worse than they should have, considering the talent. They turn around and lose 2 of their top returning D linemen to Colorado. The offense was non-existent. It ran for about 100 yards a game. Sporadically bad quarterback play. This was just a bad team all the way around. Lost 7 games by double figures, so it's not like these were even close contests. Just an embarrassment of a job, and I think if it happens again, the seat's going to be scorching hot, Nick, I would assume, and obviously a lot of coaches, they get fired way sooner than they should, and if he were to, win 3 or 4 games this year and get axed, I think that'd be incredibly disrespectful to his entire tenure. Could have lasted a decade at this point. But momentum is a thing in college football. going both ways. And if momentum is, reversed into a negative way, I think for Pittsburgh, they might be looking to move on elsewhere. Maybe not this year, but I think next year could certainly align for him being the top guy on the hot seat. But I wouldn't be shocked one bit, Nick. Turn another 3-win season, you'll be gone real quick.
This is one of those situations where I feel like the grass isn't always greener out there in Pittsburgh. If they do fire Pat Narduzzi, who's 65-50 over just about 10 years, nearly 10 years in charge at Pittsburgh, he's the third winningest head coach in program history behind Hall of Famers Jock Sutherland and Pop Warner, two very respected names in the sport, especially Pop Warner, a legendary name. And he won that ACC title in 2021. He won a division title in the ACC in 2018 as well, and competed against Clemson in that ACC title game. So there has been some good seasons here, productive seasons, 8 wins in 2019, 11 wins in 2021, 9 wins in 2022 as well. Narduzzi, a great guy. Pitt has struggled as of late. The schedule is also not easy for them. They continue to play West Virginia. They bring back that battle between those two teams, the backyard brawl. That's a tough matchup. Certainly they have to play Clemson and Louisville back to back. They also get, newcomers Cal, who are going to be solid, at Cincinnati, an old Big East matchup rivalry. So certainly some tough games on the schedule here for Narduzzi. This team could struggle. I don't think firing him makes any sense at this point. I think he's just a really solid coach. People may be feeling out there in Steelers country that, it's gotten a little bit stale for them, and, Pittsburgh Panthers country, it's gotten a little bit stale, and that certainly can happen. Coaches kind of run out of steam, run out of momentum, like you were alluding to. I just think moving on for him, you might bring in a younger guy, and the grass may not be greener, and the Pitt could still find themselves in a tough cycle here. I think abandoning him right now doesn't make a lot of sense. This is kind of a conversation we can have in 2 more years if they struggle again this year and they struggle again in 25.
Looking at the final name on the list, certainly a controversial one. One that I probably don't think of as highly as you, Nick, but I think the point you make here with Ryan Day is if he loses to Michigan again, he's gone. And I certainly think that's not something you can really debate. Losing 4 years in a row to Michigan is just unacceptable. 13-1 his first season, lost the Fiesta Bowl in a game they should have beat Clemson in, lost the national title game a year after that. 3 straight 11-2 campaigns here for the Buckeyes, a team that I picked to win the national championship a season ago, and they came up just short. They had pretty average quarterback play throughout the year, and they still were this close, 30, 40 yards away from beating Michigan, Nick. So, this is a really good football team, and that shows it right there. 40 yards away from the college football playoff, essentially. It's just been really tough for them, Nick, because they really play so hard against Michigan for 3 quarters. They get to the 4th quarter and just stalls out, and I think that's the thing Ohio State fans certainly probably upsets them the most is because, that's how it is. It's a game of inches, and they just seem to lose it when it comes to that team up north. And you really got to feel for the Buckeye fans, especially someone like me who, respected this team enough to pick them to win the national championship. Is not a fan of Ohio State. I picked them to beat Georgia in the Peach Bowl. We both did. I was beaten on the table for a month straight, Nick. These guys are going to beat the Bulldogs. And I've never seen a team play so hard and come up so short. I was so impressed. Even when I picked them to win, just the emotion they put into that game, the preparation they showcased. Ryan Day, never seen him so passionate, Nick. They came up just short. And that's why you got to feel for him, right? But that's the truth, is that he's going to be on the hot seat. And I appreciate him showing so much energy in trying to put this team in best positions to win. But when you come up short, regardless if you have a 56-8 record or not, 39-3 in conference, those 3 losses are to the same team, the one team you cannot lose to. If it happens again, Nick, he's probably going to be axed. And I don't think there's much of an argument there because they can get anybody in the country. I just don't know what else to say. I think that was a pretty good monologue right there.
I put this on the list because you say, right, any other coach in the country that's 56-8 and 39-3 in the conference, you look at it and say they cannot be on the hot seat. But this is not any other school in the country. This is the 1% of schools where you have to go out there, you have to beat Michigan. This is up there with the elites, right? Alabama, LSU, other programs. You have to go out and win the big games. And Ryan Day has struggled 3 years in a row to beat Michigan, and has struggled in the playoffs the last couple of cycles as well, losing in the Peach Bowl, losing in the Cotton Bowl, and not in the playoff, but losing the Cotton Bowl last year and losing the Fiesta Bowl in the playoff against Clemson. This is a team that should be competing for a national title. They should be playing in a national title game, and they have not done that. That one national title game they played in, they got blown out by Alabama. Ryan Day got a great start. I know people joke and put the memes on social media that he started his career on third base and all that, which I think is a bit disrespectful because he is a great coach from the base level of it. But this is a program that they want to win national championships. They cannot continue to lose to Michigan. If they lose this year with a new head coach out there with Jim Harbaugh gone, if they lose to Michigan this year, at home, that is just an embarrassing loss that you cannot overcome, in my opinion. If you're Ryan Day, at that point, you have to be out of a job if you lose to Michigan again at home. I questioned some of the coaching decisions in that Fiesta Bowl in 2019. I think there were some questionable decisions made in that game, some questionable decisions in the Peach Bowl loss as well. I know they had some injuries, and I give that one a bit of a pass on that one because they did really fight to the last second, and they had a game-winning field goal lined up that just got hooked terribly by a bad kick, a bad hold as well. Ryan Day, though, he has to go out and beat Michigan this year, right? Those three losses in conference in Michigan are a stain on that, and Ohio State fans know it. They sit there every single day probably thinking about how they cannot believe they keep losing to Michigan 3 years in a row, and Columbus is just unacceptable. I put this on here simply because if he does not beat Michigan this year, I'm booking it now. You can write it down. He will be fired if he does not beat Michigan this year.
Yeah, I think the whole born on third base comments are just a little absurd. It's just trash talk from Michigan fans. I mean, for a guy who lost his father when he was just a young kid to, play football at New Hampshire, start his coaching career at New Hampshire, to work his way all the way up to, pretty much a successful head coach. There's a little nonsense. Was he handed the Ohio State job? I mean, sure, he was only on the staff for about a year and was promoted to that role, but, Urban Meyer handpicked who he wanted. Could have been anybody, and this is the guy it was. So I think those comments are just complete nonsense, and I certainly, I hate to hear that. I don't appreciate that for Ryan Day. Obviously, losing to Michigan's one thing, but telling the story I just told is a completely different thing, Nick.
I agree with you. And also, people say like, oh, he was handpicked, but there was tough circumstances at that point in time. Urban Meyer wasn't in trouble with the administration, and they sort of had to make a move very quickly. He won 3 straight games after getting hired in 2018 as being, the coach stepping up at that point, the interim head coach. So I think, removing that interim tag before the 2019 season made a lot of sense because you don't really want to go out and do a lengthy coaching search when you have a guy that's talented. The players like him in the locker room, keeps that continuity. So, hiring him made a lot of sense in 2019. It still makes a lot of sense with the 56-8 record after 5 seasons. It's just Ohio State's a tough place to coach. It's kind of like Florida, again, like the big heavy hitters in college football. They want to win national championships, and they have not. In 5 years, they have one appearance in the national title game, lost in that game by a significant margin, and have not made their way back in 2 straight years without winning their conference title either. Things are certainly souring up there in Columbus.
It's going to be it for today's episode. I appreciate you joining me, Nick. Not as many coaches on the hot seat probably in years past. I seen one list the other day that had Lincoln Riley at number 1. That's just complete nonsense. So obviously there's a lot of grasping at straws going on. And maybe we're doing the same thing with some of these guys on this list. But I think they're certainly feasible. I think we gave some good descriptions of all these guys. Hate to see anyone lose their job, but certain programs I think certainly need to potentially look in the other direction.
Certainly feels like this is going to be a quieter year with a lot of teams entering new conferences. A lot of realignment shuffling around. Teams are not going to be wanting to make the move and fire a coach with the uncertainty of joining a new conference and kind of getting acclimated to that. I think some of the bigger programs are going to want to keep the guy in charge to keep that stable transition. But the 5 programs here we listed all could potentially fire their coach at the end of the season if things go sour very early on. It's something certainly to monitor.
Yeah, it's a good point. There's arguments for both sides. Some schools want to have it right going to a new conference. Some schools shouldn't want to make a change, though. School like Florida and this new look SEC, you make a change, you're going to lose a lot of momentum in recruiting. It's going to be really hard to recover. So I think there's certainly good arguments to be made both sides. That's going to be it for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.
I really like that one. That was a lot of fun. It's a great